Most people who think of Jewish life in America picture New York, the delis, the Diamond District, the synagogues on every block. But the real map stretches far beyond one city. There are towns where Yiddish is the first language of nearly every child. Places where Persian families who fled Iran reshaped one of the most famous addresses on earth. Hamlets where 100 synagogues serve one community and everything closes at sundown every Friday. The modern world replaced the corner grocer with a delivery app. Here the butcher wraps your cut in paper and asks after your daughter by name. The modern world moved prayer behind a screen. Here the same doors open at the hour they have always opened. The modern world scattered families across time zones. Here 3 generations break bread at the same Friday table. Sephardic kitchens, Hasidic schoolyards, retiree synagogues. You will not want to miss what is coming next. It begins with the scent of spice through a half-open door. Number 10, we start our countdown in a place you would never expect to find one of the most vibrant Sephardic Jewish communities in the United States. Seattle, Washington, the Pacific Northwest, land of rain, coffee, and tech giants. Not exactly where you would look for descendants of the Spanish Inquisition. But since World War I, Seattle has had the largest percentage of Sephardic Jews compared to the total Jewish population of any major American city. It began in June of 1902 when 2 men named Solomon Calvo and Jacob Polakar arrived in Seattle from Marmara, Turkey. 2 years later, Nissim Al-Hadef arrived from the Isle of Rhodes in Greece. These men found each other in a Greek coffee house in downtown Seattle, and when they began to speak, something remarkable happened. They discovered they all spoke the same language, Ladino, the ancient form of Spanish that Sephardic Jews had carried with them for 500 years since their expulsion from Spain in 1492. Word spread quickly. More families came. By the end of the 1930s, Seattle had 3 Sephardi synagogues, 2 Jewish schools, and a Ladino theater troupe performing plays in medieval Spanish. The community gathered to dance, to sing, to smoke water pipes, and to eat delicacies like bulimas, bizcochos, and burecas. These recipes trace back to the Ottoman Empire. Today, Seattle is home to roughly 4,000 Sephardic Jews. It is the 3rd largest community in the United States after New York and Los Angeles. And something extraordinary is happening here. The Ladino language, which linguists feared was dying, is enjoying a worldwide revival. Much of that revival is centered right here in Seattle. The University of Washington now runs a dedicated Sephardic studies program, bringing this ancient tongue into the classroom for a new generation. A community that kept an ancient Spanish dialect alive for 5 centuries in the Pacific Northwest is remarkable enough. But travel across the country to a small seaside town in New Jersey, and you will find something even more unusual. Number 9. Deal, New Jersey, a tiny borough on the Jersey Shore. Population around 750 in winter, but when summer arrives, something extraordinary happens. The population swells more than tenfold to over 6,000. Mansion after mansion fills with families. Luxury cars line the streets, and almost everyone you see belongs to a single community, Syrian Jews from Brooklyn. According to census data, roughly 16% of Deal residents identified as having Syrian heritage. That is the highest percentage of Syrian Americans in any municipality in the entire country. The community calls Deal by a different name, Brooklyn South. This is not your typical beach town. Forbes listed Deal as the most expensive zip code in all of New Jersey in 2024. The median home price exceeded $3.7 million. Oceanfront estates feature Mediterranean architecture, private pools, and security gates. The approximately 1,000 families who stay year-round have built a dozen Orthodox synagogues, several religious schools, and a wide selection of kosher restaurants serving dishes you would find in Aleppo or Damascus. The first synagogue was established here in 1973. In the Syrian Jewish community, the synagogue is not just a place of worship, it is the center of social life. The birth of a child, a bar mitzvah, a wedding anniversary, all are marked by receptions and luncheons held after Shabbat morning services. The community gathers, the community celebrates, the community endures. A Syrian Jewish enclave where homes sell for millions and the population swells each summer is a world apart. But the Syrian Jews of Deal came from somewhere, and that somewhere is a Brooklyn neighborhood most New Yorkers have never heard of. Number 8. Gravesend. A neighborhood in southern Brooklyn that most tourists never visit. No trendy restaurants, no art galleries, just tree-lined streets, modest brick homes, and one of the most tightly knit communities in all of America. The first Syrian Jews to arrive in the United States were Jacob Dweck and Ezra Sitt, both from Aleppo. They sailed from Liverpool, England on July 22, 1892, aboard a ship called the Germania. Emigration to New York began in earnest around 1907. The community originally consisted of two distinct groups: Jews from Aleppo in northern Syria and Jews from Damascus in the south. Each brought their own traditions, their own melodies, their own recipes. Today, the flagship synagogue is Congregation Shari Zion on Ocean Parkway. Constructed in 1960, this massive building drew the community to Gravesend throughout the 60s and early 70s. According to a recent demographic study commissioned by the UJA Federation of New York, there are 38,000 Syrian Jews in the New York City region. Walk these streets and you will notice something unusual about the houses. Modest homes have been torn down and replaced with large, upscale, single-family properties. 3 stories, ornate facades, far grander than you would expect for this neighborhood. The reason is religious. Observant Jews cannot drive on Shabbat. They must walk to synagogue. So homes within walking distance of Shari Zion became extraordinarily valuable. Families purchased modest houses near the synagogue, demolished them, and built new homes worth millions of dollars. From Brooklyn's Syrian Jews, we travel 3,000 miles west to discover a Persian Jewish world that transformed one of the most famous addresses in America. Number 7. Beverly Hills, California. When you think of this city, you think of Rodeo Drive, movie stars, palm trees, and sports cars. But here is what most people never realize. Approximately 20% of Beverly Hills residents are of Iranian descent, and the majority of them are Jewish. After the Iranian Revolution of 1979, roughly 30,000 Iranian Jews fled the Islamic Republic and settled in Beverly Hills and the surrounding Westwood area. The concentration became so significant that locals began calling a section of Westwood by a different name, Tehrangeles. This is a Jewish world most people have never encountered, not the Ashkenazi Eastern European tradition that shaped New York. This is Persian, Iranian, a distinct culture with its own food, its own music, its own traditions of faith and family. The Nessa Synagogue was established in 1980, just months after the revolution, to serve this new community of exiles. It was founded by Rabbi David Shofet. His father, Yedidia Shofet, served as the chief rabbi of Iran from 1922 until 1980. The impact on Beverly Hills has been profound. In 2007, election ballots began to be printed in Persian. That same year, Jimmy Delshad, a Persian Jew, became the mayor of Beverly Hills, the first mayor of Iranian descent in the city's history. An estimated 82% of Iranian Jews in Los Angeles are self-employed. They own businesses and they run real estate empires. They built a community from nothing after losing everything. The Persian Jews of Beverly Hills arrived fleeing revolution, returned now to the American South, to a city where Sephardic Jews arrived nearly 3 centuries ago. They helped birth something that would reshape Jewish worship forever. Number 6. Charleston, South Carolina. Spanish moss hangs from live oaks, antebellum mansions, the scent of magnolia in the humid air. This is one of the oldest cities in America, and it holds a secret that most visitors never discover. The first documented Jew in Charlestown was a Spanish translator who arrived in 1695. The earliest Jewish settlers came from either England or from English colonies in the Caribbean. Having founded their congregation in 1749, they established what would later be claimed as the first Reformed synagogue in the United States. The congregation was named Kahal Kadosh Beth Elohim, the Holy Congregation House of God. It began as an Orthodox community founded primarily by Sephardic immigrants. By the end of the 18th century, Beth Elohim had become the largest Jewish community in the entire nation, with a membership of 500 people. Almost 24 men of Beth Elohim served in the War of Independence. Among them was Francis Salvador, who became the first Jew to serve in an American legislature. Killed shortly after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Salvador was also the first Jew known to die in the Revolutionary War. But Charleston's most profound contribution to Jewish history came in 1824. 47 congregants signed a petition asking to change the traditional Sephardic Orthodox liturgy. They requested shorter services, English translations of the prayers, and sermons delivered in English. This was revolutionary. This was the birth of Reform Judaism in America. The present Greek Revival Building, constructed in 1841, is the second oldest synagogue building in the United States and the oldest in continuous use. Charleston's Sephardic Jews helped birth Reform Judaism, and they died fighting for American independence. But travel further south to Georgia, and you will find a community that arrived even earlier and still possesses something extraordinary. Number 5. Savannah, Georgia. The charming coastal city with cobblestone streets and squares shaded by ancient oaks. Here stands Congregation Mikveh Israel, America's third oldest Jewish congregation and the oldest in the entire American South. The founders arrived in Savannah in July of 1733 aboard a ship called the William and Sarah. It was the largest group of Jews to settle in North America during the entire colonial period. 41 passengers disembarked that day. 34 of them were Sephardic Jews. The remainder were Ashkenazic Jews of German descent. The vast majority of these Sephardic colonists had survived the Spanish and Portuguese Inquisitions. They had been forced to live as crypto-Jews, families who publicly pretended to be Catholic but preserved their Jewish identity in secret. Lighting Shabbat candles behind shuttered windows, teaching their children Hebrew prayers in whispers, practicing their faith at the risk of torture and death. And when they fled across the ocean to Georgia, they brought something with them, a Sefer Torah made of deerskin. This sacred scroll had likely been created by crypto-Jews in Spain or Portugal. Today, it is on display in the congregation's museum. It is considered the oldest complete Torah in America. Congregation Mikveh Israel was also the first Jewish community to receive a letter from the President of the United States. In response to a congratulatory letter, President George Washington replied to Levi Sheftal in Savannah. The current building is the only Neo-Gothic synagogue in all of America. Its spires reach toward the sky like a medieval cathedral, a building unlike any other synagogue you have ever seen. Savannah's Jews carry a Torah made of deerskin, created by crypto-Jews who hid their faith from the Inquisition. But there is one American city where Sephardic Jews did not simply arrive. They received a letter from George Washington himself, a letter that would define religious freedom for centuries to come. Number 4. Newport, Rhode Island. A small New England town that once rivaled New York as a center of colonial commerce. Wealthy merchants, a busy harbor, ships arriving from Europe and the Caribbean. And in 1762, a building was dedicated that still stands today as the oldest synagogue in the United States. Touro Synagogue. The congregation was founded in 1658 by Sephardim, descendants of Marranos, who had fled the Inquisition in Spain and Portugal. The first Jewish residents of Newport, 15 Spanish Jewish families, had arrived that same year. They likely came via Curacao, home to the oldest active Jewish congregation in all the Americas, dating back to 1651. Walk inside Touro Synagogue and you will notice something unusual beneath the raised platform where the Torah is read, a trapdoor. No one knows exactly what it was for. Some say it was a hiding place. Others say an escape route. Either way, it stands as a symbol of the fear and apprehension these refugees carried with them. Centuries of persecution, generations of hiding. The trauma embedded in the architecture itself. But in America, they found something different. In 1790, President George Washington sent a letter to the Hebrew congregation in Newport. His words would echo through centuries of American history. He wrote that the new nation would give to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance. Touro Synagogue was declared a National Historic Site in 1946. It is the only surviving synagogue building in the United States dating to the colonial era. A profound symbol of religious freedom and a promise that America would be different. George Washington's letter to Newport's Jews established a principle of religious freedom that would echo through centuries. But the very first Jews to arrive in what would become the United States landed not in Newport. They landed in a Dutch colony that would one day become the largest city in America. Number 3. New York City, September 1654. A ship arrives in the harbor of New Amsterdam. Aboard are 23 Jewish refugees from Recife, Brazil. They had fled after the Portuguese recaptured the colony from the Dutch. They were Sephardic Jews, and they were about to establish the first Jewish congregation in North America. The new settlers faced restrictions. They could not trade freely. They could not own property easily. They could not worship in public. But out of this struggling community grew Congregation Shearith Israel, the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue. Congregation Shearith Israel was formally organized in 1655. Until 1825, it was the only synagogue in all of New York City. Over the following century, Sephardic communities established themselves in the major port cities of British North America. By the time of the American Revolution, Jewish congregations existed in 6 centers: New York, Newport, Philadelphia, Charleston, Savannah, and Richmond. Until at least 1795, all documented congregations in what became the United States followed the Sephardic liturgical rite. Even as Ashkenazi Jews came to outnumber Sephardim by the mid-18th century, the Sephardic way of worship remained dominant. The melodies, the Hebrew pronunciation, the order of prayers, all were Sephardic. This was the foundation upon which all American Jewish life would be built. Shearith Israel maintains multiple historic cemeteries in New York City. The first, also known as Chatham Square Cemetery, was established in 1682. It contains the remains of early Spanish and Portuguese Jewish settlers, Revolutionary War veterans, and the founders of American Jewish life itself. Shearith Israel was the seed from which all American Jewish life grew. But our next entry takes us to a city that once barred Jews from its hotels, and within decades became one of the most Jewish cities in America. Number 2. Miami Beach, Florida. The famous barrier island across Biscayne Bay from downtown Miami. Art Deco buildings, white sand beaches, palm trees swaying in the tropical breeze, known worldwide for glamour and sunshine. But for decades, this was a place where Jewish people were explicitly unwelcome. In the 1930s, advertisements for some oceanfront hotels openly declared that Jewish guests were not wanted. Signs at establishments restricted entry to Gentiles only. The anti-Semitism was not hidden. It was printed on the front door. Then, in 1949, Florida's legislature passed a law ending discrimination in real estate and hotels. And the Jewish community bloomed. By the 1970s, nearly 80% of Miami Beach's population was Jewish. The influence was tremendous. Miami Beach elected at least 16 Jewish mayors. The city earned the Yiddish nickname shtetl by the sea. For those unfamiliar, a shtetl is the Yiddish word for a small Jewish town in Eastern Europe. The first synagogue was built in 1929. It still stands today as the Jewish Museum of Florida. By 1980, rising prices and shifting demographics began to change the landscape. Many Jewish families moved north to Broward and Palm Beach counties. The percentage dropped significantly. Yet the cultural memory remains embedded in the architecture, in the food, in the institutions. You can still feel it in the streets. Miami Beach was once a place that turned Jews away at the door. Within decades, it became one of the most Jewish cities in America. But our final destination reveals a truth that most Americans have never learned. Number 1. Before the wave of Eastern European immigration that would later define American Jewish life, Sephardic Jews had already written the first chapter of the story. They founded the first 6 congregations in America: New York, Newport, Philadelphia, Charleston, Savannah, Richmond. All Sephardic, all following the ancient Spanish and Portuguese liturgical rite. Until at least 1795, every documented synagogue in what became the United States followed Sephardic traditions. Even as Ashkenazi Jews came to outnumber Sephardim in most North American congregations by the mid-18th century, the Sephardic character of colonial American Judaism remained dominant. The Sephardic way set the tone for early communal institutions: synagogues, cemeteries, charitable societies, the very fabric of American Jewish life. These Sephardic founders fought and died in the American Revolution. They received letters from George Washington affirming their place in the new nation. They built trade networks spanning the Caribbean, the Americas, and Europe. They carried Torah scrolls made of deerskin across oceans. They preserved a language, Ladino, that connected them to medieval Spain. According to a 2020 poll conducted by Pew Research, approximately 2/3 of American Jews identify as Ashkenazi. Only 3% identify as Sephardic. 1% identify as Mizrahi. Those numbers suggest Sephardic Jews are a footnote, a minor chapter in a larger story. But those numbers tell only part of the truth. The Sephardic Jews who first arrived on American shores did not merely join a nation, they helped build it. And in hidden corners of America, from Seattle to Brooklyn, from Beverly Hills to Savannah, their descendants continue to live in ways that connect directly back to medieval Spain, to the Ottoman Empire, to a world most Americans will never see. In Savannah, there is a Torah made of deerskin, created by crypto-Jews hiding from the Inquisition 500 years ago. It is still read, still carried, still alive. A kitchen door closes in one of 10 American cities where Sephardic families built a world most Americans will never see, and the last trace of cumin settles into the plaster where it has lived for decades. The recipes did not come from cookbooks. They came folded inside suitcases from Aleppo, from Istanbul, from Cairo, and the women who carried them are still cooking. The grandchildren stand beside them now, learning not from measurements, but from the weight of a hand tilting the jar. But there are towns on this map where Jewish life does not settle into a neighborhood because it is the neighborhood. The calendar, the economy, the language children hear before they hear English. What you are about to see is the most quietly extraordinary place on this list, and it has been hiding in plain sight for over a century. Number 10. We start in the East End of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in a leafy residential neighborhood called Squirrel Hill. It sits just a few miles from downtown, named likely by early settlers for the black squirrels that once filled its oak trees. In the 1920s, Eastern European Jewish immigrants began moving here in large numbers from Oakland and the Hill District. They never left. By 2010, roughly 40% of Squirrel Hill's residents were Jewish. A study by the United Jewish Federation found that 33% of all Jewish people in Greater Pittsburgh live in this one neighborhood alone. Researchers noted that the stability of Squirrel Hill as a geographic hub of the Jewish community is unique in all of North America. Walk down Murray Avenue on any given morning and you will pass a kosher bakery, a Jewish day school, a yeshiva, a community center, and a mikvah before you have gone 2 blocks. But what truly sets Squirrel Hill apart is something rare in Jewish communities anywhere. Here, Reconstructionist, Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox families all share the same streets. In many American Jewish communities, the Orthodox segment is culturally and even geographically separated from everyone else. Not in Squirrel Hill. This neighborhood defied that pattern for a century. Then came October 27, 2018. A gunman entered the Tree of Life synagogue during Shabbat morning services and killed 11 people. It was the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in American history. 6 others were wounded, including 4 police officers who rushed to the scene. But the community's response showed the world what Squirrel Hill was made of: unity, solidarity, a refusal to be defined by hatred. The neighborhood did not fracture, it drew closer together. By 1970, 45,000 Jews were living in Pittsburgh and contributing to every aspect of life, from academia to medicine to public service. And Squirrel Hill remained the beating heart of it all. A neighborhood where 40% of the population is Jewish and every denomination shares the same streets is remarkable. But what about a town where over half the population was once Jewish and thousands of them had survived the Holocaust? Number 9. About 15 miles north of Chicago's downtown sits the suburb of Skokie, Illinois. Its population is around 68,000. It began as a German and Luxembourger farming community called Nile Center. But after the Second World War, everything changed. In the 1950s, the 1960s, and the 1970s, an estimated 8,000 Holocaust survivors settled in Skokie. They made up roughly 10% of the Jewish community. Yiddish could be heard on every other street corner. Synagogues, Hebrew schools, Jewish delis, kosher butchers, and Israeli bakeries defined the character of the town. At its peak in the mid-1960s, nearly 60% of Skokie's population was Jewish. It had the highest per capita concentration of Holocaust survivors anywhere in the United States. Then came 1977, when a neo-Nazi group called the National Socialist Party of America announced plans to march through Skokie. They had chosen this town deliberately. They knew who lived there. The village government refused to grant permission. The case became one of the most agonizing legal battles in American history. The American Civil Liberties Union defended the Nazis' right to march on free speech grounds. One of its lawyers was himself Jewish. Before this crisis, the survivors in Skokie had been a quiet community. They raised families and rarely spoke about what they had endured. But the threat of Nazis marching through their streets ignited something. It brought their stories out of the silence. And from that fire, they built the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. It opened on April 19, 2009, with a keynote speech by President Bill Clinton and with Elie Wiesel in attendance. Today, Jewish residents make up roughly 30% of Skokie's population. The demographics have shifted. But the legacy of those survivors and their refusal to let hatred pass unchallenged remains the defining story of this town. A community that stood against hatred is powerful. But what about a quiet New Jersey suburb that built one of the most complete Orthodox Jewish communities outside of Israel, and hardly anyone noticed? Number 8. Teaneck, New Jersey sits in Bergen County, just 10 minutes from the George Washington Bridge into Manhattan. Population around 39,000. To the untrained eye, it looks like any other well-kept American suburb. Tree-lined streets, tidy lawns, school buses in the morning. But look closer. Teaneck has over 20 synagogues and more than 20 kosher restaurants. That is roughly one synagogue for every 2,000 residents. The Orthodox Union describes it as one of the most dynamic Orthodox communities outside of Israel. Teaneck became the model for modern Orthodox suburban life. These are families fully engaged with the modern world, university educated, working in medicine, law, finance, and technology, but at the same time maintaining strict religious observance. The town has an ERUV, a symbolic boundary that permits observant Jews to carry items outdoors on the Sabbath. There are multiple Jewish day schools, a thriving Sephardic congregation, and a mikvah. What makes Teaneck even more interesting is its broader diversity. The suburb has significant African American, Korean, and Filipino communities. In fact, Teaneck was one of the first communities in America to voluntarily desegregate its schools, back in 1965. Jewish life here does not exist in isolation. It thrives alongside other cultures in a way that few places manage. 20 synagogues in a single New Jersey suburb is quietly extraordinary. But head south to Florida and you will find a city whose Jewish story involves 16 Jewish mayors. Signs that once banned Jewish guests from hotels, and a Yiddish nickname that translates roughly as the little Jewish town by the sea. Number 7. Miami Beach, Florida. The famous barrier island across Biscayne Bay from downtown Miami, known worldwide for its Art Deco buildings and white sand beaches. But for decades, this was a place where Jewish people were explicitly unwelcome. In the 1930s, advertisements for some oceanfront hotels openly declared that Jewish guests were not wanted. Signs at some establishments restricted entry to non-Jewish customers only. The anti-Semitism was not subtle. It was printed on the front door. Then, in 1949, Florida's legislature passed a law ending discrimination in real estate and hotels, and the Jewish community bloomed. By the 1970s, nearly 80% of Miami Beach's population was Jewish. The influence was tremendous. Miami Beach had at least 16 Jewish mayors. The city earned the Yiddish nickname shtetl by the sea. A shtetl is the Yiddish word for a small Jewish town in Eastern Europe. The first synagogue was built in 1929. It still stands today as the Jewish Museum of Florida. By 1980, rising prices and shifting demographics began to change the landscape. Many Jewish families moved north to Broward and Palm Beach counties, and the percentage dropped significantly. Yet the cultural memory remains embedded in the architecture, the food, and the institutions. You can still feel it in the streets. Miami Beach was once 80% Jewish, and it still carries that legacy in its bones. But travel up the Long Island Railroad from Manhattan, and within 40 minutes you will arrive in a cluster of towns where Friday afternoon feels like nothing else in America. Number 6. The Five Towns is an informal grouping of villages on the south shore of western Long Island. Lawrence, Cedarhurst, Woodmere, Hewlett, and Inwood. They sit just across the border from the New York City borough of Queens. The total population is around 50,000. An estimated 30,000 of those residents are Jewish. In some areas, the Jewish population reaches as high as 75%. On a Friday afternoon in Cedarhurst, Central Avenue transforms. Bakeries push out fresh challahs as fast as the ovens allow. Kosher butchers and fish shops do the highest volume of the entire week. Grandmothers run into granddaughters on the pavement. Rabbis greet their congregants between errands. The whole mechanism of Jewish communal life shifts into its highest gear as the Sabbath approaches. When Shabbat arrives, Central Avenue falls quiet. Many stores close entirely on Saturday. The Orthodox community, which started with a handful of families in a Cedarhurst storefront back in 1928, grew over the following decades into the dominant institutional presence. They established an ERUV, synagogues, yeshivas, and a mikvah. They transformed the commercial heart of these towns so completely that the weekly rhythm of opening and closing is dictated by the Jewish calendar. A cluster of Long Island villages where Jewish life dictates when shops open and close is remarkable. But cross the continent to California and you will find a city whose Jewish community rewrites every stereotype you might have heard. Number 5. Beverly Hills, California. The famously wealthy city within Los Angeles County, population around 34,000. You think of Rodeo Drive and film stars, but here's the reality most people never hear. Approximately 61% of Beverly Hills residents are Jewish. That makes it the second most Jewish incorporated place per capita in the entire United States. And here is what truly sets it apart. The largest religious community in Beverly Hills is Persian Jewish. Following the Iranian Revolution of 1979, waves of Jewish families fled Iran and settled in Beverly Hills and the nearby Westwood area. The concentration became so significant that locals began calling a section of Westwood Tehrangeles. This is a Jewish world most people in Britain have never encountered. Not the Ashkenazi Eastern European tradition that shaped New York. This is Persian, Iranian, a distinct culture with its own food, its own music, its own traditions of faith and family. An estimated 50,000 Persian Jews live across the broader Los Angeles area. This community has quietly become one of the most significant cultural forces in the city. Jewish history in Los Angeles stretches all the way back to 1841, before California even became a state. But it is the Persian chapter that makes Beverly Hills unlike anywhere else. A city where Persian Jews transformed one of the most famous addresses in the world is a story few people know. But return to the East Coast, head to southern Florida, and you will find a city where over 70% of the population is Jewish. And it all started with a single family in 1931. Number 4. Boca Raton, Florida, the southernmost city in Palm Beach County. Population approximately 100,000. Known for its beaches, its golf courses, and its gated communities with terracotta roofs stretching to the horizon. An estimated 70.8% of residents identify as Jewish. The city has 16 synagogues and over 40 kosher restaurants, markets, and bakeries. Local organizations describe it as having one of the highest per capita Jewish populations outside of Israel. And this enormous community traces back to a single family who arrived in 1931. What drove this growth was migration. Jewish retirees from the American Northeast, particularly New York and New Jersey, moved south in enormous numbers from the 1970s onward. They brought their synagogues, their delis, their social clubs, their entire way of life. Since the pandemic, the migration has accelerated further, with younger Orthodox families relocating for the warm weather and the fact that Florida charges no state income tax. For British viewers, the comparison writes itself. Just as thousands of British retirees moved to the Costa del Sol or the Algarve each year, American Jewish retirees built Boca Raton into a community of their own. Except here, an entire religious and cultural infrastructure came with them. A sun-drenched Florida city where 70% of the population is Jewish and 40 kosher restaurants line the streets would seem hard to surpass. But travel north to a hamlet in New York's Rockland County and you will enter a world where Yiddish is the primary language and more than 100 synagogues serve a single community. Number 3. Monsey is an unincorporated hamlet within the town of Ramapo, Rockland County. It sits about 30 miles northwest of Midtown Manhattan. It does not appear on most maps as a proper town or village, and it is classified as a census-designated place. But do not let that fool you. Monsey has over 100 synagogues, and according to census data, 41% of residents speak Yiddish at home. Those figures are striking for an American hamlet most people have never heard of. Let those numbers settle for a moment. The community is predominantly Hasidic. Several courts and dynasties are represented. Adjacent to Monsey sit the communities of New Square, which is almost entirely made up of Skverer Hasidim, and Kasser, which is almost entirely Vishnitz Hasidim. Together, they form a vast network of ultra-Orthodox Jewish life that has been expanding steadily since the 1970s. The growth has created friction with existing residents over housing development, school funding, and local zoning regulations. These are real and sensitive matters that affect real people on every side. But the sheer scale of what exists here is staggering. An unincorporated hamlet with no official municipal status, yet with more Jewish institutional density than most major cities anywhere in the world. 100 synagogues in a hamlet where 4 in 10 people speak Yiddish is something most people struggle to believe. But the next town on our list is growing so fast, it may soon become the 3rd largest city in its entire state. And nearly every one of those new residents is Orthodox Jewish. Number 2. Lakewood Township, New Jersey, located in Ocean County. As of the 2020 census, the population stood at 135,158. That was an increase of 45.6% from the 2010 count, which itself had jumped 53.8% from the year 2000. The population essentially doubled in 20 years. It all began in the 1940s when Rabbi Aharon Kotler, one of the most influential Jewish leaders of the 20th century, established Beth Medrash Govoha, a yeshiva and kollel, a center of advanced religious study. By 2016, that institution had grown to serve 25,000 students across 74 affiliated yeshivas. It is one of the largest centers of Jewish learning on the face of the earth. Estimates suggest that by 2018, roughly 2/3 of Lakewood's residents were Orthodox Jews, around 90,000 people. Lakewood is now the 5th largest city in New Jersey. If growth continues at this rate, it could become the 3rd largest by the 2030 census. The birth rate in Lakewood is among the highest in the world for any municipality. Kosher eateries, Judaica stores, and Jewish-run businesses line every major road. The rhythms of Shabbat and Jewish holidays are woven into the identity of this place. Rabbi Kotler's grandson described his grandfather as a revolutionary who believed that traditional Judaism could thrive and flourish in America, a man who was, by any definition, completely countercultural. As with Monsey, the extraordinary growth has created real pressure on infrastructure and neighboring communities. These tensions are honest and deserve acknowledgement. But what has been built here, from a single yeshiva in the 1940s to a city of 135,000, has no parallel in modern demographics anywhere. A township that doubled its population in 20 years is a phenomenon without equal. But our final destination surpasses even Lakewood. It is a place where over 93% of the population is Hasidic Jewish, where Yiddish is nearly the only language spoken, where the median age of residents is just over 11 years old, and where the community was founded by a man who survived the Holocaust and resolved to build a world entirely apart. Number 1. Kiryas Joel sits in Orange County, New York, about 55 miles north of New York City. It was founded in the 1970s by Grand Rebbe Joel Teitelbaum and a group of followers from the Satmar Hasidic movement. They chose this remote wooded location to build a self-reliant community guided entirely by traditional religious values. The village started with roughly 500 people in 1977. By the 2020 census, the population had reached 32,954. The 2023 estimate put that figure at approximately 42,000. That represents a 60% surge between 2010 and 2020, and the population continues to grow. Over 93% of residents speak a language other than English at home. That language is overwhelmingly Yiddish. Only 6.3% report speaking English exclusively. The vast majority belong to the Satmar Hasidic sect, which traces its roots to Satu Mare in Romania and the Hungarian-speaking Jewish world that was devastated during the Holocaust. Kiryas Joel has the youngest median age of any municipality in the entire United States, just 11.4 years old. More than half the residents are under 18, and the streets are filled with children. Because of the village's compact size, residents walk to kosher grocery stores, bakeries, boutiques, yeshivas, and houses of worship. Local charitable organizations such as Tom Chai Shabbos provide essential food packages to families facing hardship, ensuring no one goes hungry during the Jewish holidays. Acts of mutual support are not optional here. They are built into the structure of daily life itself. The village has faced its share of legal and political challenges. In 1994, the United States Supreme Court heard the case concerning the Kiryas Joel Village School District, raising fundamental questions about the separation of religion and government in America. The community's rapid expansion has also generated friction with surrounding municipalities. Scholars of Jewish life note that nowhere outside Israel has there been a community so homogeneous, so uniform, and so thoroughly Hasidic. 18.9% of residents report Hungarian ancestry, the highest of any municipality in America. It is a living thread connecting this village to a world that was nearly destroyed. From 500 people in the 1970s to over 42,000 today, Yiddish, the language that was meant to die in the camps of Europe, is the first language of nearly every child born here. The streets are not filled with silence or ghosts. They are filled with the sound of children. There are more children per square mile here than anywhere else in the United States, and the population is still growing. The avenue has gone dark, and 10 towns that feel more Jewish than New York have folded into the Sabbath. Somewhere a porch light stays on for a guest who always arrives on time. The candles are already lit. The street has emptied the way it empties every week, as though the pavement itself remembers the rhythm. But what comes next is something else entirely. Places where that presence hides behind familiar storefronts, where even the neighbors have never noticed what was built beside them. You would need someone to point it out, and no one ever does. Number 8. Cherry Hill, New Jersey, a sprawling township in Camden County, just across the Delaware River from Philadelphia. Population around 74,000. To most people, Cherry Hill means shopping centers, chain restaurants, and neat rows of suburban homes along Route 70. Approximately 11,000 Jewish residents call the Cherry Hill area home. The township has around 7 synagogues, most of them Reform, with a growing Chabad presence. On the west side of town, roughly 300 Orthodox families have built their own network of institutions, schools, and kosher food suppliers. Cherry Hill is also the headquarters of the Jewish Federation of Southern New Jersey. What makes Cherry Hill significant is its geography. It sits roughly an hour south of Lakewood, 90 minutes from New York, and less than 2 hours from Baltimore. That places it on a corridor of Jewish life stretching along the entire eastern seaboard. A town of strip malls and school buses, hiding a community that has been growing quietly for decades. Number 7. Silver Spring, Maryland. Specifically, the neighborhood known as Kemp Mill, a census-designated place in Montgomery County with a population of just over 13,000. It sits minutes from the White House, and it contains the largest Orthodox Jewish community on the entire East Coast between Baltimore and Miami. Kemp Mill has more than half a dozen synagogues packed within its boundaries. American Jews commonly refer to it as a shtetl. That word is the Yiddish term for a small Jewish town in Eastern Europe. The fact that it is applied to a suburb of the American capital tells you everything. The neighborhood was built in the 1950s by Jewish real estate developers catering to families leaving Washington for the suburbs. But what sets Kemp Mill apart is its diversity. A large wave of Russian Jewish immigrants settled here beginning in the 1980s. Because Silver Spring also has a significant Ethiopian population, Kemp Mill became home to a sizable community of Beta Israel, Ethiopian Jews, living alongside Russian families and American-born modern Orthodox households. The broader Maryland suburbs of Washington have a Jewish population of around 116,000. Kemp Mill is the beating heart of it all. Number 6. Summerlin, Las Vegas, Nevada. A master-planned community at the western edge of the Las Vegas Valley, pressed against the Spring Mountains. Home to approximately 25,000 Jewish residents, it is the fastest-growing Jewish community in Las Vegas. Reports have estimated that 600 new Jewish families arrive in Las Vegas every single month. The Jewish story of Las Vegas goes back further than most people realize. In the 1940s and 50s, Jewish casino owners helped build the Strip from empty desert. But for decades, the community remained tiny. Until the 1970s, Temple Beth Shalom was the only synagogue in the entire city. Keeping kosher once required a 4-hour drive to Los Angeles just to buy groceries. Then came the migration. Jewish retirees from New York and New Jersey discovered their money went 3 times further in the desert. Young Orthodox families found affordable housing unthinkable on the East Coast. Chabad arrived in 1994. By the year 2000, the Jewish Federation estimated 75,000 Jews in Las Vegas. Temple Beth Shalom spent $10 million relocating to a 7-acre site in Summerlin. Sin City and Shabbat. Slot machines and synagogues. It sounds impossible, but the community in the Nevada desert is thriving. Number 5. Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania. The name comes from 2 places in Wales. Bala, a market town, and Sinwyd, a small village. Welsh Quakers settled this land in the 1680s. For 3 centuries, it remained one of the most quietly genteel suburbs on the Philadelphia Main Line. Then in 1990, a local synagogue erected an ERUV. An ERUV is a symbolic boundary, often made from a thin, nearly invisible line of monofilament strung between telephone poles. Within its borders, observant Jews are permitted to carry items and push prams outdoors on the Sabbath. That single act transformed the neighborhood. Once the ERUV went up, Orthodox families could walk to synagogue. They could bring their children. They could live a full Sabbath life without needing a car. Over the past decade, an estimated 400 Orthodox families moved into Bala Sinwyd and the surrounding Lower Merion Township. The community is centered around Aish HaTorah and the Philadelphia Community Kollel. Walk down Montgomery Avenue on any Saturday afternoon and you will see families in traditional dress passing Jaime's Deli, a Philadelphia institution since 1986. One thin line of fishing wire. That is all it took. Number 4. Memphis, Tennessee, a city on the bluffs of the Mississippi River, deep in the American Bible Belt. Jewish merchants began arriving in the 1840s, drawn by the cotton trade. By the Civil War, a small but established Jewish community was woven into the fabric of the city. Then came December the 17th, 1862. Major General Ulysses S. Grant issued General Order No. 11. It was an order expelling all Jews from his entire military district, covering areas of Tennessee, Mississippi, and Kentucky. It was the only time in American history that an official military order targeted an entire religion for expulsion. In Paducah, Kentucky, 30 Jewish families were given just 24 hours to pack and go, but one man refused to comply. Cesar Kaskel, a Jewish immigrant from Prussia, traveled to Washington and secured a meeting with President Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln revoked the order within weeks. The Jewish community returned to Memphis. Then came the Yellow Fever. In 1873, a devastating epidemic killed 2,000 people in Memphis alone, including 94 Jews. The community rebuilt again. Jewish-owned businesses shaped the city. Goldsmiths became Memphis's largest department store. Lansky Brothers opened a clothing shop on Beale Street that would later dress a young truck driver named Elvis Presley. And then there is Baron Hirsch Synagogue. Founded in 1862, the congregation grew steadily. By the 1950s, it had emerged as the largest Orthodox congregation in all of North America. Its sanctuary, completed in 1957, was built with 2,200 permanent seats and space for an additional 1,000 worshipers. Today, Memphis continues to hold the distinction of having the largest single Orthodox congregation in the country. Number 3. West Rogers Park, also known as West Ridge. A neighborhood on the far north side of Chicago. In the early 1960s, this neighborhood reached its peak. 47,000 Jewish residents lived here, making up nearly 75% of the total population. Synagogues occupied almost every major intersection. On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the neighborhood went quiet. Then the same forces that hollowed out Jewish communities across urban America arrived. Families moved to the suburbs. The Jewish population dropped year after year, a steady decline. Devon Avenue, once the main street of Jewish West Rogers Park, filled with Indian electronics shops, Pakistani restaurants, and Korean grocers. By the turn of the century, the Jewish population had fallen to roughly 20,000. And then something happened that almost no urban Jewish neighborhood in America has managed. It came back. Orthodox families began buying the old brick bungalows. An ERUV was constructed in 1992. Young couples from yeshivas and kollels arrived. The Jewish population climbed back to approximately 25,000. Today, 27 synagogues dot West Rogers Park, nearly all of them Orthodox. The neighborhood is home to the largest Hasidic community in the entire Midwest, and Devon Avenue tells the whole story. A section of the street is still honorarily named Golda Meir Boulevard. Tel Aviv Kosher Bakery stands between a kebab house and a Pakistani halal restaurant. Walk one block and you pass a Jewish bookshop, a sari emporium, and a grocery selling both kosher and halal meat. A Jewish neighborhood that was supposed to disappear, and did not. Number 2. Pikesville, Maryland, a suburb in Baltimore County, just northwest of the city limits. As of the 2020 census, Pikesville had a population of 34,168. The Jewish population is estimated at over 31,000. In a suburb of 34,000 people, over 31,000 are Jewish. Locals have a phrase for it. 100,000 Jews in 3 zip codes. That includes Pikesville and the surrounding communities of Owings Mills and Reisterstown. Baltimore has been described as having the most religiously observant Jewish population in the United States. The intermarriage rate among Baltimore Jews sits at approximately 20% compared to roughly 50% nationally. The physical centerpiece of Pikesville is 7 Mile Market. It is the largest kosher grocery store in the entire United States, with over 55,000 square feet of retail space. Jack and Rose, Holocaust survivors from Europe, opened a small shop called Jack's Grocery in Lower Park Heights in 1958. That tiny store grew into the supermarket that now anchors Pikesville's main road. Drive through Pikesville on any Friday evening around 7 in the evening, near the intersection of Slade and Greenspring Avenues, and you will have to stop your car a dozen times. Families in Shabbat clothes cross the road in every direction. Children run ahead. Grandparents follow slowly behind. The whole suburb is in motion, on foot, heading to Shul. Once you have witnessed it, you do not forget. Number 1. Beechwood, Ohio. A small city in Cuyahoga County, roughly 10 miles east of downtown Cleveland. As of the 2020 census, the population stood at 14,040. According to the Jewish Federation of Cleveland's population study, 89.5% of Beechwood's residents are Jewish. That makes it the highest concentration of Jewish people per capita outside of New York and Israel. The story begins with resistance. In 1948, the Anshe Chesed congregation, representing 1,800 Jewish families, applied to build a synagogue in the village. The village council denied the application. They cited concerns that the synagogue would be detrimental to the public safety and welfare of the village. The case dragged through the courts for years. In 1954, the Supreme Court of Ohio ruled that the synagogue must be allowed. It was built. And then everything changed. Jewish families began moving in. One synagogue became 2, then 5. Day schools opened. A Jewish community center was established. In 1991, the Montefiore home relocated from Cleveland Heights to Beechwood. In 2005, the Maltz Museum of Jewish Heritage opened on Richmond Road. And in 2010, the Jewish Federation of Cleveland itself moved its headquarters to Beechwood. Today, Beechwood has over a dozen major Jewish institutions. Several synagogues represent every denomination. The Mandel Jewish Community Center, the headquarters of the Cleveland Jewish News, Menorah Park, the Federation offices, the Maltz Museum. Every piece of institutional Jewish life a community could need, concentrated in a single city of 14,040 people. 89.5%, a city that tried to keep them out. They built their first synagogue by court order. They built the rest because no one could stop them. And most people in America have never heard of it. 8 towns, they were expelled, denied, overlooked, and forgotten. They were built anyway. Jewish America has always been hiding where no one thought to look. 3 maps behind us now, and the country looks different than it did when we began. Every town opened a corridor that was not there a moment ago. A challah cools on a windowsill in a town whose name you would not recognize. The flower on the counter is the same brand her mother used. You start to wonder how many doors you have walked past in your own city without ever turning the handle. How many prayers were spoken on the other side of the wall while you slept? How many families sat down together on a Friday evening in a house you drove past without a second glance? The pattern is this. Orthodox Jewish communities have been quietly buying into the towns nobody else wants. And then they win. On a Thursday afternoon in Lakewood, New Jersey, the air smells like yeast and sugar. Kosher bakeries along the main commercial roads stack challahs 5 deep in their windows. Young mothers push double strollers past Judaica shops with silver candelabras in the display cases. Men in dark suits walk between study halls with the quick, purposeful stride of people who know exactly where they are going and when they need to arrive. The Lakewood Shopper, one of several flourishing community weeklies, runs more than 170 pages of adverts. Kosher Chinese restaurants, kitchen remodelers, travel agencies, wedding halls. Every page speaks of a community not just surviving, but expanding at a pace that defies every assumption about small-town America. The median age here is 21.7 years. In the rest of Ocean County, that number is 42.7. This is not a retirement community or a college town. This is something else entirely. And the question that hangs over every street corner, every new housing development, every crowded yeshiva hallway is simple. What do Orthodox Jews see in a place like this that everyone else has missed? The answer begins in 1943. A Lithuanian rabbi named Aharon Kotler arrived in Lakewood with a vision that most Jewish leaders in America thought was delusional. Kotler had survived the destruction of European Jewish life. He had led a yeshiva in the town of Kletsk, in what is now Belarus. Most of his 300 students had perished in the Holocaust. He carried with him the weight of everything that had been lost, and an almost stubborn belief that it could be rebuilt. He needed a quiet place, somewhere removed from the noise and distractions of New York City, but close enough to reach it. Lakewood had once been a fashionable winter resort. The Rockefellers and the Goulds had kept estates here in the late 1800s. Grand hotels lined the lakefront. But by the 1940s, the glamour had faded. The hotels stood half empty. The town was affordable and overlooked. Nobody else wanted it for what Kotler needed. He founded Beth Midrash Govoha in a modest building with just 13 students. It was the first kollel in the United States. A kollel is a center of advanced religious study for married men who receive a modest stipend while studying Torah full-time. The idea that men would devote their entire adult lives to religious scholarship in America was considered absurd. Marshall Sclair, the influential Jewish sociologist, wrote in 1955 that the history of Orthodox Judaism in the United States could be written in terms of institutional decay. He believed it was a tradition that would quietly fade in the New World. That prediction could not have been more wrong. Aaron Kotler, the founder's grandson, has spoken publicly about what Lakewood was like when he was a child. He recalls that there were only 3 Orthodox children in the entire township. He once visited Brooklyn for the Sabbath and saw 30 or 40 children gathered in an afternoon group. He thought it must be the International Convention of Orthodox Jewish Children. He did not know there were that many in the entire world. The mechanism that turned Lakewood from a fading resort town into one of the fastest growing municipalities in America is not wealth. It is not politics. It is religious law. Every Friday at sundown, a 25-hour period begins in which observant Jews cannot drive. They cannot use electricity. They cannot carry objects outside the home unless an ERUV, a symbolic boundary made of wire and posts, surrounds the neighborhood. This means everything a family needs must exist within walking distance. The synagogue, the school, the kosher grocery, the mikveh, the bakery. This single requirement produces, by accident, exactly what urban planners spend decades trying to engineer. Dense, walkable, mixed-use neighborhoods where people know their neighbors because they pass them on foot every single week. The yeshiva sits at the center like a gravity well. Young men come to study, they marry, they stay. Their children fill the schools. New families arrive to be near the institutions. About 1,000 new families move to Lakewood every year. The same blueprint appeared in Orange County, New York. In the 1970s, Grand Rebbe Joel Teitelbaum led a group of Satmar Hasidic followers to a remote wooded area 55 miles north of Manhattan. They called it Kiryas Joel. The village grew 63% between 2010 and 2020 alone, from just over 20,000 to nearly 33,000. It appeared almost overnight on the map of America's fastest-growing places. In Postville, Iowa, 30 minutes from the nearest fast food restaurant, Lubavitcher Hasidim from Brooklyn arrived to run the largest kosher meat plant in the country. A farming town that had been bleeding residents suddenly counted 30 ethnicities among its growing population. The pattern repeats. Find a place that others have abandoned. Build the institutional infrastructure first. Let the community grow around it like a living thing. But what does it feel like from the inside? Thursday in Lakewood is preparation day. The rhythms of the week build toward the Sabbath like a tide pulling inward. At the Tomche Shabbos warehouse, the largest kosher food pantry in New Jersey, volunteers sort and pack boxes of chicken, fish, challah, and staples. More than 1,250 families in Lakewood depend on these deliveries for their Sabbath meals. Dedicated drivers load their cars and fan out across the township. By Friday afternoon, every box will have reached its destination. This is not optional charity. It is structural. The median household income in Lakewood is roughly $44,700. The county average is closer to $65,000. But the average household here has 5.12 people compared to 2.61 in the rest of Ocean County. These are large families on modest incomes. The mutual aid networks, the food pantries, the interest-free loan societies, the clothing exchanges. These are not extras. They are load-bearing walls. One Tomche Shabbos delivery driver describes the work simply. He says every box means another family has what it needs. He drives his route like any other delivery driver would. No ceremony, no recognition. The dignity of the process, he explains, is the point. Late in the evening, the study halls of Beth Midrash Govoha are still full. Rows of paired desks stretch the length of enormous rooms. Young men sit across from each other, rocking gently over open volumes of the Talmud, tracing lines of text with their fingers, debating in hushed voices that occasionally rise into something closer to argument. As of 2025, the yeshiva enrolls over 9,000 full-time male students across 74 affiliated institutions. This makes it one of the largest post-secondary institutions of any kind in New Jersey. The sound inside these halls is unlike anything in a university library. It is the sound of 2,000 simultaneous conversations happening at once, a low roar of study that continues until well past midnight. Friday afternoon arrives, and the acceleration is visible. Bakeries push out their final trays. Kosher butchers wrap their last cuts. The streets fill with a particular kind of urgency that has nothing to do with panic and everything to do with purpose. Then sundown comes, and then silence. The commercial streets empty. The car parks go still. Families walk to synagogue in clusters, fathers holding the hands of small children, older boys walking in groups of 3 or 4. For 25 hours, a city of more than 135,000 people enters a different mode of being. A shopkeeper on one of the main commercial streets explains that every customer who walks through his door is also a neighbor. There is no anonymity in Lakewood, he says. If you sell someone a bad piece of fish on Thursday, you will sit next to him in synagogue on Saturday morning. What strikes you first in the residential streets is the children. The school district provides busing to students enrolled at 74 yeshivas. Children on scooters line the pavements. Pairs of girls in matching uniforms walk to school carrying book bags nearly as large as they are. In Kiryas Joel, the numbers are even more striking. The largest single age group in the village is children under 5, numbering more than 7,000 and comprising over 19% of the total population. More than half of the village is under 18. These are not communities in decline. They are communities in acceleration. And as Lakewood fills, the pattern radiates outward. Young Orthodox families seeking more space and affordable homes have moved into Jackson Township, just across the border. Kosher grocery chains and Judaica stores have opened branches on the edges of Tom's River to serve both communities. The same thing is happening in Orange County, where developers have cast their gaze further north toward the foot of the Catskills, looking for quiet villages where the land is still cheap. And in newer destinations far from the traditional northeastern corridor, Orthodox families have begun arriving in Orlando, drawn by affordable housing and a growing kosher infrastructure. But growth at this speed does not happen in a vacuum. The expansion that transformed Lakewood from a fading township into the fifth largest municipality in New Jersey has produced real friction with neighboring communities. Residents of nearby towns point to overdevelopment, where multifamily dwellings have replaced single-family houses and natural woodland. They raise concerns about a public school system under fiscal strain and about a township that has changed beyond recognition within a single generation. The phrase Lakewood-style development has become shorthand in local political debates. In Tom's River, yard signs appeared on front lawns reading, "Do not sell and Tom's River strong." The message was not subtle. The economics are genuinely complicated. Tax-exempt properties owned by private schools, charities, and religious institutions make up 8% of Lakewood's total assessed value, according to county tax data. In Tom's River, that figure is 1.5%. The public school system serves a shrinking share of the township's children, while the municipality funds busing for thousands of yeshiva students. Residents outside the Orthodox community feel they are funding a system they do not benefit from. The community responds that its members pay taxes, support local businesses, and generate the economic activity that rescued Lakewood from decades of decline. Both sides have numbers that support their position. Neither side is entirely wrong. In Postville, Iowa, the tensions took a different and more painful form. When the old high-grade meatpacking plant went under, a Lubavitcher businessman named Shalom Rubashkin bought it and transformed it into a glatt kosher processing facility. The town was saved from economic collapse, but the cultural gulf was enormous. Some Postville residents had never met a Jewish person or heard a foreign language outside of Spanish class. Then in 2008, a massive federal immigration raid at the plant led to the arrest of nearly 400 undocumented workers. The plant went into bankruptcy. Its chief executive was convicted. The Jewish community shrank by roughly half, from about 100 families to around 50. A Postville town councilor named Bob Schroeder said plainly that the newcomers had saved the town from what he called a slow death. He said the community had been reinvigorated, that there was life, that he had made many friends from all over the world, and they were very good people. His words carried no romance and no agenda, just an honest accounting of what he saw with his own eyes. The narrator of this story does not resolve the tension because it remains unresolved. These communities bring growth, institutional investment, and new life to places that were losing all three. They also bring change that is rapid, visible, and culturally unfamiliar to the people who were there first. In Tom's River, interfaith dialogues have been initiated between long-standing residents and Orthodox leaders to find common ground. Some places are finding a way through, others are still searching. The story has no ending because the story is still being written. Saturday morning in Lakewood. The streets carry that particular silence that comes not from absence, but from intention. Families walk in small groups toward their synagogues. A father holds the hand of a boy who cannot be more than 4. An older man in a black coat walks slowly, unhurried, his prayer book tucked under his arm. The bakeries are shuttered. The car parks are full, but no engine turns over. 82 years ago, a man who had lost nearly everything arrived in a town that was losing the same. He had 14 students and an idea the rest of the world considered impossible. His grandson has said that he was completely countercultural. He was a revolutionary who believed that traditional Judaism could not only survive in America, but flourish. That yeshivas could be built here. That a life organized entirely around study and faith could take root in soil that had never held it before. The streets on this Saturday morning hold no monuments, no plaques, no declarations of what was accomplished. Only the sound of shoes on pavement and children calling to one another in a language that was supposed to disappear. The oldest residents remember when this was a town of boarding houses and empty hotels. The youngest will never know it as anything other than home. The shoes keep moving. The voices do not stop. A mezuzah sits on a doorframe that looks like every other doorframe on the block. And 10 towns that almost no one knows are Jewish keep their silence the way they always have. The mailboxes give nothing away. The lawns are trimmed the same as every other lawn. But the next chapter of this map belongs to communities that did not wait to be discovered. They walked into the places nobody else wanted, picked up the keys to buildings with water stains on the ceiling, and began building something no one asked them to build. They did not ask permission. They did not wait for an invitation. Number 7. We start our countdown in a place that will surprise you. Dothan, Alabama. A small city of roughly 72,000 people tucked into the southeastern corner of the state, surrounded by peanut farms, red dirt roads, and long stretches of pine forest. It is not a place most people associate with Jewish life. And yet Dothan made national headlines for something no other town in America has done. It started paying Jewish families to move there. The program launched in 2008 through the local Jewish community and offers relocation incentives of up to $50,000 to families and retirees willing to commit to at least 3 years of residency. The reason was painfully simple. Temple Emmanuel, the heart of Jewish life in Dothan for over a century, had fallen from 110 member families in the 1970s to just 50 by 2008. The pews were emptying. The congregation was fading. Rather than let it disappear, community leaders decided to invest real money into keeping it alive. And it worked. New families arrived from across the country. Services filled again. The synagogue steadied itself and began looking forward instead of back. Alabama charges no state income tax on retirement income. The cost of living in Dothan sits well below the national average. A comfortable 3-bedroom home here costs a fraction of what it would in South Florida or the Northeast. Healthcare access is solid, with a regional medical center serving the area. And the Southern hospitality in this part of Alabama is not a marketing phrase. It is a way of life. You will be invited to dinner by neighbors you have only just met. But what makes Dothan truly remarkable is not the financial incentive. It is the message behind it. This is a community that wanted Jewish life so badly, it reached into its own pockets and said, "Please come. Please stay. Please help us keep this alive." A town that pays you to move there is remarkable enough. But the next place on our list has something even rarer. A Jewish community that has existed without interruption for nearly 300 years in a place you would never expect. Number 6. Savannah, Georgia. The moss-draped oaks hanging low over the sidewalks. The cobblestone squares lined with park benches and fountains. The grand antebellum homes with their wrought iron balconies and shuttered windows. Savannah is one of the most beautiful small cities in America, but its Jewish story runs deeper than most people realize. In 1733, just months after the city itself was founded by James Oglethorpe, a group of 42 Jewish settlers arrived by ship from London. 2 years later, in July of 1735, they formally established Congregation Mikveh Israel. It was only the third Jewish congregation in all of America, following those in New York and Newport, Rhode Island. That congregation still exists today, and it is now at the highest membership level in its entire history, fueled by an influx of retirees from the Northeast and Midwest alongside younger families discovering the city for the first time. The rate of synagogue affiliation in Savannah stands at 80%. Across the nation, the average is just 30%. That gap alone tells you something profound about how this community operates. Beyond Mikveh Israel, the Orthodox congregation, B'nai B'rith Jacob was established in 1854 and today serves around 300 families. There is a Chabad center in the downtown area, a well-programmed Jewish community center, and the Jewish Educational Alliance that has operated continuously since 1912. For retirees specifically, the Savannah Jewish Federation actively recruits and welcomes newcomers with orientation programs designed to help people settle in comfortably. Median home prices sit well below the national average. Winters are mild and short. The historic district is entirely walkable, and if you sit in the sanctuary at Mikveh Israel on a Saturday morning, you are sitting in a place where Jewish prayers have been spoken without interruption since before the American Revolution. Number 5. Asheville, North Carolina. A community with that kind of unbroken history is extraordinary. But what if there were a place tucked into the Blue Ridge Mountains where the Jewish community is so tight-knit, it achieves something no town its size has ever done? Nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains along the French Broad River, Asheville has drawn health-seeking visitors for more than a century. The cool mountain air, the four-season climate without brutal winters, and the thriving arts and music scene have turned it into one of the most desirable small cities in the American South. What most people do not know is that Asheville is also home to a remarkably active Jewish community. There are approximately 1,200 Jewish households in the area. That is a small number by any measure. And yet, this community holds a distinction that no other town its size can claim. Asheville is the smallest Jewish community in the entire country to support its own Jewish community center. The Asheville JCC sits on a leafy campus and offers programming for all ages, from toddler groups to senior fitness and cultural talks. It serves as the social anchor for retirees who have moved to the mountains from larger cities up north. Beyond the JCC, the town supports 2 synagogues, a Chabad house, and an annual Jewish film festival that draws attendees from across the region. Jewish Family Services of Western North Carolina provide senior care management and chaplaincy support specifically for elderly residents who may need help navigating the healthcare system or simply need someone to talk to. The community is experiencing what local leaders describe as unprecedented growth, with retirees arriving from the Northeast, the Midwest, and increasingly from South Florida. They come for the mountain scenery and the moderate cost of living. They stay for the intimacy. In a city of roughly 94,000 people, the Jewish community is small enough that you will recognize every face at Shabbat services on a Friday evening, and large enough that you will never feel like you are on your own. A mountain town with the smallest Jewish community in America to run its own JCC proves that size is not what matters. But now we head to a place in Florida that has taken the entire concept of retirement and turned it into something no one quite expected. Number 4. The Villages, Florida. If you have never heard of the Villages, the sheer scale will astonish you. This is one of the largest retirement communities in the world. It sprawls across 3 counties and multiple zip codes in Central Florida. There are 50 golf courses. There are 3 town squares with nightly live entertainment where couples dance under string lights to big band music and to country and bluegrass. Hundreds of social clubs cover everything from pickleball to pottery to amateur astronomy. And inside this enormous sprawl, a Jewish scene has quietly taken root and grown stronger every year. There is a full-time Chabad center, a Reform congregation called Temple Shalom, a budding Jewish Federation chapter, and an estimated 3,000 to 6,000 Jewish residents who have made this place their home. Homes in the Villages start in the low 200,000s for cozy villas and reach up to around 600,000 for lakefront models surrounded by palms and flowering bushes. Instead of a traditional homeowners association fee, residents pay a flat amenity charge that opens every pool, craft studio, fitness center, and recreation hall across the entire community. Shabbat here often means climbing into a golf cart, steering past rows of manicured lawns and blooming hibiscus, and pulling up to services just as the sun drops behind the tree line. After the service, you might linger over Kiddush while bluegrass music drifts in from the town square a few streets over. The annual Hanukkah menorah lighting on the main square draws hundreds. There is no state income tax in Florida. And the healthcare infrastructure inside the villages is massive, with multiple medical centers and specialist clinics built directly into the community, so residents rarely have to leave. A golf cart ride to Friday night services in a community of thousands of Jewish neighbors sounds almost too good to be real. But the next town on our list does not offer that kind of scale. What it offers instead is something money cannot buy. Number 3. Venice, Florida, a small coastal city on the Gulf of Mexico, about an hour south of Tampa. Venice is not flashy. There are no towering resort hotels or celebrity restaurants. The downtown is lined with small independent shops and cafes and a single-screen cinema that still draws a crowd on weekday afternoons. What Venice has is something far more unusual. A median resident age of 69 years old. Only 1.6% of the population is under the age of 5. This is a town shaped almost entirely by its demographics, and the rhythm of daily life reflects that. Retirees flock to nearby Sarasota, locals say, but their parents live in Venice. And among those residents are approximately 1,500 Jewish people who have built a quiet but deeply connected community. The Jewish congregation of Venice serves as the spiritual home for many of them. Members regularly describe it as a home away from home, the kind of place where you walk in on your first visit and are treated as if you have belonged there for years. The Shabbat of Venice and North Port has become a second anchor, running weekly programs, holiday celebrations, and a Tuesday morning book club that regularly draws 25 women who arrive early and stay late. For a small town, that kind of consistent turnout says everything you need to know. Many residents in Venice do not have family nearby. Their children and grandchildren live in distant states, sometimes overseas. There is a real and daily vacuum of need for connection, and the Jewish community fills it through volunteering, companionship visits, and daily check-ins that have nothing to do with religious obligation and everything to do with caring for one another. The Gulf Coast beaches are minutes from any front door. Crime is low, and the cost of living sits comfortably below neighboring Sarasota. Venice does not try to be everything. It simply tries to be warm. And for the retirees who find their way here, it succeeds quietly and completely. A town where the median resident is 69 years old and the Jewish community wraps itself around you like family. That is Venice. But the next entry on our list tells an even bigger story. A story about one of the fastest growing Jewish communities anywhere in the United States. And it is not where you think. Number 2. Sarasota, Florida. Specifically, the Sarasota-Manatee corridor that runs along the Gulf Coast between Tampa and Fort Myers. Today, there are around 35,000 Jewish individuals living in this area. That number alone is impressive for a region most people associate with beaches and spring training baseball. But the growth rate is what makes it extraordinary. Since 2001, the Jewish population in Sarasota-Manatee has increased by 86%. That growth rate approximately doubled the regional population growth for the same period. Researchers at the Cohen Center for Modern Jewish Studies at Brandeis University have described Sarasota-Manatee as one of the fastest growing Jewish communities in the entire United States. As of 2019, the Jewish Federation of Sarasota-Manatee listed 13 congregations in its community directory. They range from the Congregation for Humanistic Judaism all the way to 3 separate Chabad centers serving different parts of the region. There is a full-service Jewish federation, a Jewish family and children's service, multiple kosher dining options, and a cultural calendar packed with lectures, film series, gallery openings, and community seders that seat hundreds around long tables decorated with flowers and candles. Unlike some cities where Jewish life concentrates in a single neighborhood, the Sarasota-Manatee Jewish population has spread across the entire region. You will find Jewish families in Lakewood Ranch and on Siesta Key and in downtown Sarasota and throughout Manatee County. The area attracts primarily retirees who are in good health and seeking an active lifestyle among people who share their values. They come for the Gulf Coast weather and the white sand beaches. They stay for the depth of Jewish infrastructure that rivals cities 10 times the size. No state income tax, world-class performing arts venues, and a Jewish community that has nearly doubled in less than 20 years with no signs of slowing down. An 86% increase in under 2 decades, 13 congregations, 35,000 Jewish lives woven into the fabric of a Gulf Coast community. And yet there is one more town on this list. Number 1. Boynton Beach, Florida. One place that captures something none of the others quite do. The feeling that you do not just belong somewhere, you helped build it. Situated in Palm Beach County, about 15 minutes south of West Palm Beach, and a world away from the glitz and expense of Boca Raton just down the road. Palm Beach County remains the single most popular destination in all of America for Jewish retirees. The median age of Jewish residents in the county sits at around 70, and within that county, Boynton Beach has quietly become one of the most compelling options for people seeking real community without pretense and without paying a fortune for the privilege. Homes here are available from the mid-$100,000 range. That is a fraction of what you would pay in Boca Raton or Delray Beach, just a few miles south, where the same square footage might cost you 3 or 4 times as much. But affordability is only part of the story. The Jewish community in Boynton Beach has built an education program specifically designed for its demographic of snowbirds, semi-retired residents, and fully retired people looking for purpose and connection. There are guest lectures brought in from national organizations, special series that run through the year on subjects ranging from Jewish history to current affairs to health and wellness. A monthly Jewish-themed movie night where the discussion afterward often lasts longer than the film itself, and regular daily and weekly classes that keep people coming back, not because they feel obligated, but because they genuinely want to be there. Community leaders describe Boynton Beach as a great place for people looking to live life to the max in a real community. Not a gated retirement village, not a managed care facility. A real, breathing town where people know each other by name and look out for one another without being asked. Multiple synagogues sit within easy driving distance. Kosher groceries are accessible. And the broader Palm Beach County ecosystem provides world-class healthcare, cultural institutions, and transportation links to the rest of South Florida. According to the Pew Research Center, 29% of all Jewish Americans are now aged 65 and older. That proportion is expected to climb over the coming decade, and the demand for connected, affordable, spiritually grounded places to live will grow with it. Towns like Boynton Beach are not waiting for that wave to arrive. They are already building for it. For the longtime members of this community, the continuity of Jewish life here carries something that cannot be measured in statistics. Generations have passed through these synagogues. They attended Hebrew school together as children. They celebrated holidays together as young parents. They buried loved ones together as they grew older. And on a Friday evening in Boynton Beach, when the last light of the day fades behind the palm trees and the first notes of the service begin, every single person in the room knows your name. New roof lines rise where old ones sagged in towns that Orthodox families chose when nobody else would. Somewhere, a young father carries lumber through a door that was boarded shut 5 years ago. The paint is still fresh. The children already know which way to face when they pray. But not every story on this map is written by young hands building upward. Some of it belongs to people who already raised their children and buried their parents and decided the next chapter would be quieter. They followed a road south or west to places no one was watching, and they found exactly what they were looking for. A shul that remembered their name before they walked through the door. New York is still there. The delis and the synagogues and the Diamond District, the postcard everyone already knows. But the quiet towns were never waiting to be found. They were already complete. They had been complete long before anyone thought to look.